great today to be here at Microlyze and to be here in Coventry, which has for hundreds of years been at the centre of this country's logistics operations. So in the 18th century, the Coventry Canal opened up and very soon became a vital artery for trade on the route between Birmingham and London. In the 19th century, we saw the London and Birmingham Railway open up, carrying parcels as well as passengers on the latest technology of the time. And then in the 20th century, Coventry was a crucial location of British manufacturing, for armaments, for motor vehicles, all travelling around on the new thing, which was the motorway network via motor vehicles. But I think a key questions for this conference today, and for me in my role, about the future rather than the past. So my name is Iain Forbes. As Kate said, I work for the UK Department for Transport. My job is to help the freight and logistics sector to thrive and to solve transport problems at the border. And as you might imagine, I've been quite busy over the past couple of years. But what I want to talk about today is the government's approach to the future of the economy and the role the freight sector could play in that. So I'll do that in three ways. So first, I'll talk about the way in which the government are framing their strategy, building a little on what Richard said. I've got my own picture of the Prime Minister. Then I'll talk about the importance of the work that happens in this sector and why I think it could be crucial for what the government wants to do. And then finally, I'll pick out some individual themes that I think will be particularly relevant and discuss some of the work the government is doing in those areas. So, first question, how is the government approaching the work of getting the economy moving? What's its kind of approach to strategy? So this is the Prime Minister, and I think the first thing to say is that this is an explicitly mission-led government. So here's the Prime Minister, here's his 5 missions. So what does that mean in practice? It means this is a government that feels really strongly that it was elected to deliver change. And to do that, it's identified ambitious and measurable long-term objectives that provide a sense of purpose and energy for the country, for the government, and for those working with the government. For us, within ministries and departments, it means a new way of thinking about doing government that's more joined up, thinking about how the functions of the state can be channeled towards achieving these objectives. And for those outside, I think it's intended to be a clear statement of the changes the government wants to see and an invitation to get involved to deliver that. And there are 5 missions covering a range of objectives: clean energy, taking back our streets, opportunity, the NHS. But the Prime Minister and the Chancellor have been really clear, very clear, that economic growth is the number 1 mission of the government. That is a thing that they believe will fund our public services, will enable investment in hospitals and schools, and really importantly, raise standards of living for everyone in the country. So this government's aiming for the highest sustained growth in the G7. So that's more people in good jobs, higher living standards, and productivity growth all throughout the various different locations within the UK. That's what the Prime Minister has set out as his overarching priorities. The Transport Secretary also has clear priorities flowing through from that top message. This is Heidi Alexander, the Transport Secretary. And transport connectivity is essential for economic growth, that number 1 mission. It can widen access to opportunities, it can reduce business costs through the efficient movement of goods, it can provide access to international markets, boost productivity, unlock land for development, and incentivize investment. So DFT, in terms of the priorities that we are working to, has ambitious plans on both rail and bus reform, but it also has a big focus on infrastructure, on greener transport, and, really importantly, on integrated transport. And as part of these objectives, DFT is going to be publishing an integrated national transport strategy later on this year. This is going to focus on how transport should be designed, built, and operated to better serve its users. And the Secretary of State has been clear that it should recognise the importance of the efficient movement of goods and services as part of that transport system. And that strategy is going to be rooted in those missions I mentioned earlier and recognise transport's key role in driving economic growth and opportunities. And the department is engaging really openly with stakeholders in this sector and elsewhere to develop that strategy. So we've recently had a call for ideas. We've had road shows around the country. We've got 6,000 responses to that call for ideas. A lot of work going into thinking about what that strategy should cover and how we should frame our work, with freight right in the center of that. Now, freight, I think, is critical to enabling the wider economy to deliver the government's missions. And I think this gives the freight sector a real opportunity to contribute and to ensure it's match fit for the future. Now, freight, as I don't think I need to tell you, is the backbone of our economy. So every business, every household, every community relies on the efficient movement of goods. And from delivering essential supplies to supporting economic growth, freight transport effectively ensures the smooth functioning of daily life. It's a massive employer, it's a massive contributor to the economy, it's a key factor when international companies are making decisions about where to place their investments. And it's not just concentrated in the southeast, it's an employer throughout the entirety of the country. And I think the government does recognise that. But you know better than the government does about what could be done to further embed the work the sector does at the heart of the government strategy. And I think the key question, I suppose, I'll leave you with today is, what can you contribute and how can government help you do that? Now, if I turn to some specific areas that the government is thinking about when approaching the future strategy, I'll pick out a few and talk a little bit about how they relate to this sector. The first one, as we've already heard from Richard, is that we need to build. The government's clear, and it's making that commitment clear, that infrastructure is a really important part of its overall strategy. It will boost the performance of the economy, and the resilience and the reliability of the freight sector is an important part of that. Richard's already kind of run through how a reliable strategic road network is a really, really important part of that system. We've heard recent statements from the Chancellor and others about some key projects, including the Lower Thames Crossing. We've also heard recent announcements about the aviation sector, so Heathrow Airport and Gatwick too. And on top of all this, the government's recently announced £63 million of funding for advanced fuels to support sustainable aviation fuel. So really, really big announcements, chunky announcements looking at infrastructure and building that out. That's true at a national level, but also great strides have been made towards significant investments across the north, including £5.7 billion via the City Regions Sustainable Transport Settlements Programme, the effects of which are already being felt locally across eligible city regions, the majority of which are in the north. Also, in the budget, the government announced significant funding for flagship programmes like the TransPennine route upgrade and for key station and local rail enhancements in places like Leeds and Manchester. So investment across a range of different transport modes, including in-roads. And these projects, along with other growth measures, demonstrate a commitment to the transport network that supports industry and enhances national productivity. The freight sector is a really, really critical part of that, a critical part of the delivery of those investments, so we don't build the roads without the sector, but also a beneficiary, I think, of the investments too. And we look forward to working with you to deliver those. But if that's what the government is doing in terms of infrastructure, it's also clear that it wants to unlock private sector investment too. And a key part of that is planning reform. So the Department for Transport, my department, is working very closely with the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government to understand the hurdles faced by the freight and logistics sector when interacting with the planning system. And as a result of some really, really high-quality submissions from the sector to a recent call for evidence, we've been able to secure, for the first time ever, direct reference to the freight and logistics sector in the National Planning Policy Framework. It's now recognised as a critical growth industry. That's the document that informs the way in which planning officers around the country make decisions. This means local planning authorities are now explicitly encouraged to support the development of freight and logistics, to help the sector adapt to global trade patterns and to embrace emerging technologies. A really important signal, I think, of how important this is. And we've seen in recent days how controversial some of these projects can be. Really important, I think, that the government has given a vote of confidence and why that's kind of how important that investment is to the country. However, we understand that's not enough, and the government's recently committed to further planning reform and in the past few days introduced a planning and infrastructure bill into the Commons. So more to come on that front. So first we need to build. Next, I think, we need to innovate. So the Prime Minister is very clear he wants the UK to be at the forefront of new technologies, harnessing the potential of all sorts of different technologies, including AI. And the recently published AI Opportunities Action Plan sets out a plan for this technology. And I think this sector could be a really, really big part of that. I mean, just wandering around the hall, it's really clear to me how crucial data is to the sector, and the effective management and deployment of data is a really, really important differentiator for how companies succeed or don't in this sector. Within DFT, we're really keen to work with innovators to unlock those opportunities, and we fund a pipeline of innovation spanning from proof of concept all the way through to commercialization. So for early stage projects, we have the Transport Research and Innovation Grants Program and its Freight Innovation Fund Accelerator Program. And then for larger projects, we have the Freight Innovation Fund, which supports the commercialization of late-stage innovation solutions. And SMEs supported by this program have leveraged over £100 million of additional investment from the amount of money that the government's put in. But given the pace of change and the scale of change, we need to know from you guys who are at the cutting edge how we could go further and do more to further embed the work of the sector in this space. So we need to build, we need to innovate, we also need to decarbonise. In 2023, domestic transport was the largest emitting sector in the UK, responsible for 29% of territorial greenhouse gas emissions. Within that, HGVs were the second largest emitter after passenger cars. Yet developments in technology, which some of you in this room are already adopting, and I'm sure we'll hear more about in the next session, are helping to reduce emissions. However, challenges do remain, and there's a role for government in helping the road freight sector to reach net zero. That's why it's really, really important to work for government to work with road freight operators through various different forums, including one we operate, the Freight Energy Forum, to bring the sector together with the energy sector and talk about what's necessary to develop the deployment of zero-emission infrastructure for the future. To help build confidence, there are up to £200 million available via the Zero Emission HGV and Infrastructure Demonstrator Programme, projects of which are already live. And that's going to deploy hundreds of zero-emission HGVs and associated sites by March 26. And you can already see numerous battery electric HGVs on the road and charging infrastructure going into the ground. It's not just, as you all know, about the technology, it's about proving it works, proving it's practical, and proving it's possible to scale. And that brings us back to confidence. The data this program is collecting will give businesses the confidence they need to invest in the transition. Confidence that zero-emission HGVs are not just the future, they are the present. Right now, zero-emission HGVs make up only 0.2% of the total HGV market, so much, much more to do. More vehicles to get on the road, more infrastructure to put in place, more barriers to break down, and we want to work with you on that. Next, we also need the right people and skills. So the workforce issues of the road freight sector are well documented, most recently by the Road Haulage Association's report, Lorry Drivers, the Vital Link. And we're working closely with the sector to better understand the training and skills needs for the sector. And we're analysing the level of vacancies and economic inactivity across the local areas. This evidence will inform what national and local support is needed from Skills England and enable delivery of the Get Britain Working strategy. DFT is also raising awareness of the sector among young people. So the Department for Transport has been supporting Generation Logistics from the outset, amplifying its message on the importance of the logistics sector. And the introduction of the HGV driver boot camps in 2021 saw almost 11,000 people sign up for government-funded HGV driver training in the first 2 years. Road to Logistics, who are exhibiting here today, have also been supported in training harder-to-reach groups to join the sector. Really important to broaden the range of people who do see logistics as a career. However, driver training is only half the story, and ensuring we improve drivers' working conditions is also key to attracting and retaining drivers. And that's why DFT and industry are jointly investing up to £43.5 million in upgrading truck stops across England. And that investment is supporting operators across 30 counties in England to improve security and basic but essential facilities like toilets, showers, and eating facilities. That's on top of the £26 million Richard mentioned earlier being invested by National Highways. We also, though, need to be resilient. Now, things go wrong, and we know that, and we've had some clear examples of that over the past few years. The world is becoming more uncertain, unfortunately, and in that environment, the work of this sector to ensure critical supply chains operate is essential. Now, one of the amazing things about this sector is it just does the job. So day in, day out, this kind of sector ensures that the goods that we need get to the shops, get to people's tables, get to the hospitals, just get things done. And people only really notice it when it does go wrong. That does mean that when we did have some events in recent years, the pandemic, global instability, and we did see how the hidden wiring worked, people realized how important this sector was. We saw the transport heroes that were keeping the country moving during the pandemic, and so on. But what's really important, I think, is that we learn from that to ensure we have the right plans in place in the future to ensure that we are resilient. So within government, we're working to ensure we've got the right resilience plans in place, and we can do that much more effectively with insights from the industry about where the key vulnerabilities are and what we need to do so that we're better prepared next time things do go wrong. I would say, given the way in which the world is turning, resilience will also need to be a theme for everyone in this room in the coming years, whether that's thinking about the resilience of supply chains, whether it's about the resilience of your workforce, whether it's about the resilience of your cyber architecture. And we'll hear more, I'm sure, later today about how the industry is adapting to those sorts of challenges. So this is a mission-driven government focused on economic growth. This sector could play a massive part in that agenda. And to do that, government and industry need to work together to build, to innovate, to decarbonise, to get the right people and skills, and to be resilient. And I look forward to working with all of you to do that. Thank you very much.
Iain, thank you so much. We do have time for a quick question.
Yep.
How will you be putting the infrastructure in place for long-distance electric vehicles and with safe and affordable charging areas? Similar to the question we had in the last section, so it seems to be very much on people's minds.
Yeah, so it's a big question. And so what I can't do today is to give you a very, very detailed answer about how everything is going to happen over the coming years. I mentioned at the start of my talk, actually, the kind of the history of transport and how things are kind of changed over time as new technologies came in. And I do think that if you're maybe sat in a hole like this in 1900 and someone told you that in 125 years' time there would be an extensive network of roads around the country fueling kind of infrastructure, and that happened in a very, very short period of time, it would have been very difficult to believe. But it happened, I think. Once a technology finds its niche, I think you start to kind of see the business models, and you start to identify the key areas that are necessary to move it forward. So within government, I think the first thing I would say is we recognise the challenge. So we know that is a key enabler for making this transition happen. We know it's not going to happen all at once, but we do know we have a role to play. And part of what we're doing at the moment is using programs like the ZHID program and others to help us clarify exactly what interventions are necessary to get there. But we'll do a much, much better job if we have the right intel and insights from the people in this room.
Iain, thank you so much for coming today. Appreciate your insights. Everybody, please put your hands together for